Santorum here as part of the grassroots effort supporting this convention. Now, he testifies at our Capitol Wednesday, but first he's here to talk to us about it. So to start, why do you believe a convention of states is needed?
I served in Congress for 16 years, ran for president a couple of times. I actually had the pleasure of running here in the state of Idaho, which I enjoyed back in 2012. And what I've seen is that Washington is broken. It is no longer able to function in a responsible way. We're now at $34 trillion in debt. We have presidents in Congress doing things that the Constitution never envisioned. The courts have let them get away with a lot of things by ever expanding the power within Washington. And it's time for the states to take their rightful place. The states were supposed to be in charge of sort of everything that went on within the country, and the federal government was really there to settle disputes within the states and deal with international issues. That has completely changed. Now the federal government is involved in everything. People say there's so much money and there's so much thing going on in Washington. That's because there's so much power there. That power was never intended to be in Washington. It was supposed to be among the people. And so this is an opportunity with this proposal that we have that's being voted on in the Senate committee on Wednesday for them to reassert themselves as the Constitution permits. Article 5 of the Constitution permits the states to call a convention in the case of what we're proposing, is to limit the jurisdiction of the federal government, to claw back some of this authority back to the states, to put some fiscal restraints on Washington, so the $34 trillion deficit won't turn into $45 trillion or $50 trillion or whatever, and then finally to limit the terms of federal office holders. That includes members of Congress, but also judges or potentially bureaucrats who are there forever and ever and seem to create the swamp. So it's a way to really get at the nub of the problem in Washington.
Now, there are people that oppose this effort, right? The group Common Cause, for instance, they write on their website that Article 5 convention would lead to long and costly legal battles, uncertainty about how our democracy functions, and likely economic instability. So how do you respond to that with opponents that argue that the current Constitution doesn't need or provide any rules for a convention, including maybe who gets to decide what's changed?
Yeah, the Convention of States, where they allow the states to participate, was actually added right at the end of the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And the reason was it was added because in the original draft of the Constitution, only Congress could amend the Constitution. Now those amendments are sent to the states for ratification, and 38 states have to ratify. But the founders said, wait a minute, are we so naive to believe that if Congress and Washington becomes this powerful tyranny, that they will limit their own power? And the answer was, of course not. So they added this section to say the states must have the ability outside of Congress to be able to limit federal power. There have been many attempts in the past to do this, many balanced budgets, term limits, other types of amendments that have been proposed by the states, but they've never been able to get 2/3 vote. But we've never been in a situation where the power has concentrated so much. The tyranny has gotten to the point where presidents get up right before an election and waive $400 billion in student debt, or decide not to enforce the laws at the border, or run deficits that are just saddling our country with huge amounts of debt. So the answer is that conventions of states have been held throughout the course of our country. Prior to the Constitutional Convention in 1787, there have been other conventions of states since. They are run similar to the way a legislature runs. They are controlled by the state legislatures themselves. It was set up by the founders to be completely separate and independent from Washington, to be a check on Washington.
So let's talk about why Idaho.
Yeah.
Why are you here talking to our lawmakers about this?
So we were at 15 a couple years ago, but the last couple of years we've extended to up to 19 states now.
Okay.
Have passed conventions of the states. The proposal that's before the Idaho legislature, and Idaho is in position to do the same. Most of the states out here in the West in the Mountain West have passed it, and so you'd say Republican states. I mean, the more conservative states, overwhelmingly all 19 states are Republican-controlled legislature. They're conservative states. You know, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Texas, Florida, et cetera, Arizona. But states like North Dakota and Nebraska, et cetera, Utah have all passed this, and it's time for Idaho to do so. I mean, Idaho's a strong, principled, conservative state. I know Idaho has many problems on federal lands and other issues with the federal government, and this is an opportunity. This is a forum where a small state like Idaho gets the same number of votes as California. It's one state, one vote when you come to this convention. And so the small states, which are disproportionately ignored in Washington, have a forum here to have the issues that concern them to be addressed.
Okay, and so I also want to talk to you about your experience as a senator and also running for president.
Sure.
Obviously, it's an election year. What is your assessment of the current presidential race, likely going to be Biden-Trump battle again, and the talks about their mental competency?
Yeah, it's almost like two bull elks who have engaged and their antlers are locked and they can't get out from each other. And I think that's the way, and that's I think the way the American public looks at this. They see this that overwhelmingly that they don't want either candidate. They'd like to see two new candidates, but they're engaged and they almost need each other at this point. So it looks like it's going to be Trump and Biden. I don't think there's anything that's going to stop Donald Trump from getting this nomination. I think Joe Biden will get the nomination. My question is whether Biden at the convention, because the Democrats at their convention have a lot more flexibility to shift gears than Republicans do. Republicans, almost all of their delegates elected during their primary process. The Democrats have a whole big slate of delegates who are independent, if you will. They're not elected at the primaries, and they can play some games there. So we'll wait and see. But right now, it looks like we're in a death match. It's going to be Biden or Trump.
It does look like that so far. Obviously, it's time to change. Things are going to be happening. As you were saying, we'll keep following that. We've got former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum here. Thank you for joining us and talking about this with us, giving us kind of an inside look before you're addressing our lawmakers here in Idaho. Let's take a look at the results of that poll questions that we did ask you back in the beginning when we started talking to him here. The question was, should the state of Idaho support Convention of States with our lawmakers? And 66% of you who answered say yes, 34% of you say no. So if you have not voted, you can still go ahead and do that, and we'll check back in on that. Again,